Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, November the 19th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. And as usual, if you are here live with us, you have a priority to suggest topics of your interest to be discussed. If there are no topics, then I'm going to reach out to our backlog of topics and review topics here live. And let's take a look at the news. Let's see what's going on in Brazil. And here we have Estadão. Estadão is one of the major newspapers in Brazil, over 150 years of history, and nowadays a reasonably well-balanced newspaper in terms of political orientation. Okay, very rare to find nowadays, something that is gonna have a more balanced. Of course, it's not perfect. Eventually, they're gonna side with one side of the aisle or another. But what we see, which I find very interesting, is that they are not consistently hammering like one side of the aisle's perspective on things, right? And just to give you a perspective on what I say, Estadão was very firm against, President Bolsonaro, or let's say he was very pro getting President Bolsonaro in jail for, the, alleged scheme to take over power in Brazil. So there was a very well aligned posture with the left side of the aisle, and on different occasions, Estadão has been very quick, to point out substantial flaws of the current administration from President Lula, right? So I think it's very refreshing when you have like a news that's not gonna be just hammering one side of the aisle, right? And that's why nowadays I'm trying to focus more on news coming from Estadão. And the main news over here is about Banco Master. Banco Master is one of the Brazilian banks, and Banco Master is going under as we speak. And this is something I typically discuss in my consultations with clients whenever we are discussing the remittance of money to Brazil, right? Many naturally, foreign citizens, they get very nervous whenever they need to send large amounts to Brazil. In Brazil, as you know, there is no traditional escrow account like you would have in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and in other countries. So naturally, there is a concern. And our take on that is that Brazil typically is safer than the US when it comes to banks, right? Of course, if you're talking about currency exchange brokers, if you're talking about currency exchange agencies, we don't even touch those because they're small and too prone to fail. But whenever you're dealing with banks in Brazil, things are super solid, right? So this is a major news in Brazil that Banco Master is going under as we speak. And just to give you an idea about how rare such events are in Brazil, the last time something like that occurred, it was back in 2018. So we're talking about 7 years ago. That's the gap in terms of when the last bank went under and now Banco Master, right? So, and then I took a look at the United States. From my memory, the last one I remember, going to news, it was a bank from Silicon Valley. I think it was Silicon Valley Bank or something like this. But then I took a look and, I don't know if this information from ChatGPT is correct or not, but it says, the latest banks in the United States, they were both in this current year. Okay, so it looks like banks going under in the United States is something much more common than it is in Brazil. All right, and naturally, a follow-up question is like for, let's say if I have a bank account in Brazil, is there an insurance like it happens in the United States, for instance, under the FDIC? FDIC, last time I saw it was, I don't know, like maybe a decade ago. I think they were insuring individual accounts for $100,000, if I'm not mistaken. I just took a look at the Brazil equivalent to FDIC, and the amount covered by such insurance is just 250,000 reais, and that's actually not per bank account. They use a language saying it's per tax ID, right? So let's say if you have multiple bank accounts with a bank that is failing, the Brazilian government is not going to, give you money for every single account. They are going to give you a single lump sum of 250,000 reais, roughly $50,000, to cover your losses with this bank. All right. So this is the news, big news, because again, it's so rare in Brazil that a bank would fail that it becomes like, a major headline for sure. We also have, this is President Maduro from Venezuela. And naturally, there is this whole discussion about the United States, right, trying to create pressure enough for someone, to take over the presidency of Venezuela. I think there is somewhat consensus that, Maduro has remained in power through fraudulent ways. That's, coming not only from the United States, but many other venues, and even the left in Brazil, they kind of agree that Maduro is not like a legitimate leader, right? So that there is this discussion. There is a lot of concern in Brazil because, like in the United States, right? Suggesting that there could be war against Venezuela to remove Maduro. Of course, it is a high level of interference, like in the South America or Central South America, and Brazil is concerned, right? Like this is like a geopolitical issue from Brazil's perspective, right? So Brazil is like paying attention, and it is as much as possible trying to coordinate understandings with the United States. All right, let's go back to our live stream and see what we have in the chat window. We have the man they call Davis. Hey, Luciano, just wanted to say I have been watching your video for 2 years now. Thank you, Davis. Glad to have you on board. They are the best and most informative out there. Your live streams are great. Really appreciate, Davis. You have made yourself a future client with me, no doubt. I'm currently in Rio de Janeiro for 2 months. Enjoy Rio. And I will be returning next year again with the intention of purchasing real estate in the city. And I will be using your services throughout the process. So glad to hear, Davis. And let me open an invitation for you and anyone else. Like if you guys ever want to drop by our office for a cup of coffee, just drop by during, business hours. And we're going to be happy to have a cup of coffee with you, all right? Cafezinho brasileiro, right? Like the Brazilian coffee. Very important to note, typically we don't provide the consultations at the office. So this invitation is specifically, to share some, coffee and time with us, with the staff. All right, Davis. And if you ever need a consultation, the correct way of scheduling one is you can come to our Contact Us area. There is a button like Schedule a Consultation. You can schedule a consultation. I would be very happy to have a consultation with you. So once you schedule the consultation, just let our team know, I would like to have this consultation with Luciano, and they would assign this consultation with me. If schedule is a problem, then they will get back to you and work a time out that would be convenient to you and us, and then we would, either sit together at the office if I happen to be in Rio de Janeiro, or over Zoom. Okay, most of the consultations that are actually over Zoom. This way, we don't need, to be in person at the office. Many times we are handling closings at the cartório. We may be in different cities, but thank you so much for your kind words, Davis. And I will be returning next year again with the intention of purchasing real estate in the city, and I'll be using your services to follow the process. Amazing, Davis. And let me share with you a resource that you could use even now if you want. This is our partner real estate agency, RE/MAX Nomad States, right? So RE/MAX is like the largest real estate network in the world, and it's originally from the United States, but nowadays has a lot of traction in Brazil as well. And this particular agency, they try to follow the same standards that we do in our transactions. So they try to stay away of, let's say, less than ideal properties from a legal perspective. And there you have their contact information. You could contact them even though you're just starting your journey. I think it is always good to have, a real estate agency along with you in this journey. Thank you again, Davis, for the kind words. Really appreciate it. Mansur, olá, senhor. Como você está? Tudo bem? All right, Mansur. Muito bom. Vejo que você está praticando o seu português. I see that Mansur is practicing his Portuguese. All right, Mansur. Alexander, I saw a few media articles about the federal government allowing a private developer build a high-speed train between Rio and São Paulo. Have you heard about this? Does this story has any legs? Alexander, I would say, it's an interesting topic, right? And I would say, there is something about high-speed trains in Brazil, just like there is in the United States, right? The United States, despite many flaws, it remains like the leading nation, right, in terms of, GDP, research and development, and so on. But you don't have a high-speed trains in the United States, which is just mind-blowing, okay? And it's kind of the same thing in Brazil. So we have been, we hear, those updates or those news every now and then, probably just like in the United States, right? Like there is always, all right, now this time, we're gonna build like a track for a high-speed train between, I don't know, like Florida and Washington, D.C., and it never happens, right? So in Brazil, it's pretty much the same thing. The last attempt that I recall, like reading, the news, and, it's never like a done deal, but they say, well, there is this project, there is this bill, and now this is going to take off. It was a bullet train, a speed train, a high-speed train between São Paulo and Campinas. And this one in particular would be a very good first high-speed train, just because São Paulo is kind of close to Campinas, okay? Now, a high-speed train between São Paulo and Rio would be even better from a convenience perspective, just because it's a longer trip. It's a trip that if you're driving, it's going to take you probably between 5 to 6 hours. And between São Paulo and Campinas, if it wasn't for the traffic, it would be a 50-minute drive. However, because of the chaotic traffic in São Paulo, if you're trying to drive from São Paulo to Campinas during peak hours, you're probably going to spend over 2 hours, right, for something that shouldn't take more than 50 minutes. But very interesting. I'm going to take a look, Alexander. Really nice sharing. All right. Ousas. Boa tarde, senhor Oliveira. Boa tarde, Ousas. I know you don't do business startup investment. Do you have attorney referrals? You can send it to me. Ousas, we typically avoid as much as we can, but we do have, like a few clients for this route. And we're just careful, like whenever we have inquiries on this front. And the idea here is that unless we see, a substantial good match in terms of the applicant, we don't want to get entangled in something that is going to crash and burn down the line, all right? But we do have a few Ousas. We just typically refuse the assignment, but we do have a few tracks over here. And unfortunately, we don't have referrals on that front, Ousas, all right? Like, I mean, we did have a referral a while back, and unfortunately, right? Like, unfortunately, not our clients, but these people we would refer to this attorney, some of them, they were not really satisfied. And that's a problem, right? Like, we can never control how a third party is going to work with you. So unfortunately, Ousas, we are not providing referrals on that front for the time being. Mansour, I want to invest in Brazil. All right. I'm not sure how much it is, Mansour. Is that 150,000 US dollars? Is it 1.5 million dollars? Let me know the correct number here. On which visa should I apply? First of all, I want to visit and see Brazil. Should I write this in cover letter that I want to explore options in invest? Sure. So it depends on the amount, right? Depending on the amount, you're going to have different venues for investment. If you're talking about 150,000 US dollars, you could potentially qualify for the real estate investor visa in the Northeast and North. Like, there is a 30% reduction in the minimum investment required. You could also potentially invest in a business, right? And in a business that's just like what we addressed when answering Ousas. That's not something that we typically recommend, particularly if you haven't been in Brazil, right? Like, so your case would be one of the cases in which we would for sure not be able to assist with the business investment route, okay? Now, when you're gonna visit Brazil for the first time, depending on your nationality and your country of residency, it may be difficult to obtain a visa. And that's surprising to many people, right? Like, people say, well, Brazil is not the United States, right? Why would Brazil be so picky in terms of giving visas out? But that's actually a reality across the board nowadays, right? Like, you see in Europe, you see everywhere, and you also see in Brazil. So in Brazil, if you're trying to come from certain countries, it's going to be typically an uphill battle, right? Particularly if you're coming from, countries such as, like Nigeria or Pakistan or India, Middle East, like Brazil is going to typically make it hard for you to secure a visa. And whenever you are applying for an interview at one of those places, like the immigration officer, they are going to have in their head something like this. Well, is this like a legitimate visitor, right? Like, I mean, are they coming to invest, or better, are they coming to spend money during a tourist visit to Brazil? Okay. Whenever you're talking about investment, I'm not sure how the immigration officer is going to think about it, right? they're going to typically look at your passport, at your financial profile, and again, they want to allow people come to Brazil who have been traveling around. So if they look at your passport, let's say you've been to Europe, you've been to the United States, you're traveling around, they are going to say, all right, that looks like a good match for a visitor coming to Brazil, right? Now, if they look at your passport, they don't see any stamps. It's like, a brand new passport, and they cannot tell that you've been going places. There is typically a high chance that you're not going to obtain a visa to enter Brazil. All right? Going back to the visitor explanation, not sure if that's an ideal approach, because they could ask, well, why would you invest in Brazil if you never even came to Brazil in the first place, right? But listen, immigration appointments and reviews, they are discretionary, and it's very difficult for me to tell you what is going on at the consulate in which you're going to apply for a visa, Mansur. All right, Marisa Navas, good to see you, Marisa. Boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. A sua live é muito especial para nós. Thank you so much, Marisa. I'm also very happy to have you here with us. I hope Ricardo is with you. I hope you guys are safe and sound and in good health. All right, Alexander, thanks for the context. The U.S. Does have the high-speed train, the Acela between Boston and D.C. with over 15 million riders. But overall, you're right. The U.S. has very little high-speed rail. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know about this train. It's kilometers per hour. That's a pretty decent high-speed train, Alexander. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, I remember it was maybe over a decade ago. They were trying to do something between Florida and I think Washington, D.C., and it was, I'm not sure if they still use this nomenclature, but they would say like bullet train, right? And the target speed could be something between 400 and 500 kilometers an hour. I'm not sure if that's even feasible, but that's the memory I have from back then. But nice sharing, Alexander. Thank you for your participation. So Mansour is saying $150,000, right, Mansour? Yeah, so you would have access to both real estate investment in the Northeast and investment in a business. I would strongly recommend you to pick the real estate route, something that we have here at the firm for some nationalities that are, kind of targeted by the Brazilian government in a sense that they don't want to give you a visa. What we are doing is like we are helping some of these nationals to buy a property remotely, entirely remotely, meaning you don't come to Brazil because basically you cannot come to Brazil, right? So you buy the property. Once you bought the property, we do the filing for the real estate investor visa in Brazil, and after we file, we send the approved package to the Brazilian consulate in charge of your jurisdiction, right? Now, it's not guaranteed, but I think, in my opinion, that it is a game changer, because then it's not just like, promises or explanations or forms written. It is a pre-approved package from the Brazilian immigration in Brazil to the consulate. The consulate will still have the last word, meaning that the Brazilian approval in Brazil is not going to be binding on the Brazilian consulate, but I think it's a game changer in a sense that you already invested in Brazil. You already showed that you are a qualified immigrant, right, if you will. So that's another route that we've been assisting. It wasn't our, original plans, but just because of, our communication with some nationals, right? Like, I mean, we really feel like, they would deserve a shot and to say, listen, you know what, it's going to be more difficult for you to buy this property from abroad, but let's make this happen. And once you bought the property, we can pre-file in Brazil, send the approval real estate investor visa to the consulate in charge of your jurisdiction, and then you're going to we schedule actually the appointment. You need to schedule the appointment, but we communicate with the consulate ahead of time to deliver the file and to let them know you're going to schedule the appointment. And then, again, I think it's a game changer. Not guaranteed by any means, but you would have a really good chance of securing, right, the real estate investor visa. All right, Mansur, I hope that was helpful. Matt Gaines, boa tarde, Dr. Oliveira. Boa tarde, Matt. Boa tarde, Adrian. So, given what you said about banks, if one is immigrating from the U.S., would it be wise to keep a bank account open in both countries, U.S. and Brazil? I think so, Matt. I think it is a good idea. I mean, even if you are living like on a full-time and long-term basis in Brazil, I guess you would still have maybe obligations in the United States, or have a way to receive funds from the U.S. So I would recommend you to keep a bank account open in the U.S. And I would say as long as you stick to the main banks in the United States, you're not going to have any issues. Like, I don't recall any major U.S. bank going under. I think the last one was maybe during the 2007 2008 Great Recession. But you never hear about any major name going under, and that's the same thing in Brazil, Matt. All right. Of course, there are different strategies. If you diversify your investments, right, you also reduce the chances of too many eggs, right, broken in the same basket, right. That's a very typical strategy in the United States. And in Brazil as well, right? So diversification, right? Like some money in real estate, maybe some money, like in stocks, and I think you get the picture. All right, let's see what else we have over here. All right, let's take a look at this one. All right, so I am married to a Brazilian. We now hear that we need to register our marriage in Brazil. If we were married in the U.S., why would we have to register our marriage in Brazil? Can we ask for the permanent visa? All right, so this question here is kind of repetitive. And the core issue here is that, like, Brazilians, they need to record their civil life in Brazil in full, right? It's not when you want, it's not what you want. You got to record everything as they happen. That's the correct approach. So if you are a Brazilian and you are living in the U.S., and not just in the U.S., right? If you're living in Europe, if you're living in Asia, if you're living, I don't know, in the Oceania, anywhere, and you marry, right? After the marriage, you need to record your marriage certificate in Brazil. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you're going to be marrying again, right? Like, I mean, I had a consultation like that I'm not sure if it was last week or on Monday, and the couple, they were asking, well, we're deciding if we're going to register or if we're going to marry again in Brazil. I said, listen, you can marry again, right? When you try to marry, you need to declare that, guess what, you're not married, right? Like, so if you're married in the U.S., for instance, how are you going to marry in Brazil? It makes zero sense, I think, even from a common sense perspective, right? So you cannot marry again. You're gonna basically record your marriage from this other country in Brazil. So Brazil is gonna be aware of your marriage, okay? And it's interesting that is not how it works in other countries. Like in the United States, there is no such concept of recording a marriage certificate for Brazil. So let's say if you were marrying in Brazil, meaning a Brazilian and a U.S. citizen, you married in Brazil, U.S. says you married, like I'm fine with it, right? The U.S. is not going to ask you, well, now you need to record this marriage here in the United States. There is no such attachment to paperwork, right? In Brazil is different. Like in Brazil, we have like the cartório. The notary system is very different from the concept of notary in the United States. A notary public in the United States is someone who maybe studied for a couple of weekends before taking the notary public examination. And in Brazil, typically, someone is going to need to study for a decade or a couple of decades to become an officer at a cartório, right? So completely different universes, right? Like notary public in Brazil. I don't even like the translation as notary public. Just because I know the notary public in the US means nothing, right? And in Brazil, it means like this person who is typically more knowledgeable about the law than a lawyer, okay? So, very different ball games. But that's the system we have in Brazil, the notary public or the cartorial system. And in the cartorios, they are going to record whatever happened to you abroad. They are going to record in Brazil. And guess what? Whenever you need something, Brazil is going to say, well, if you are not doing what you should be doing, we're not going to give that to you, right? So nowadays, consulates across the globe, they are enforcing this rule that if you are married outside of Brazil and you haven't registered your marriage in Brazil yet, they are not going to give you a new passport. Okay, so this is something somewhat new. I think they've been implementing to some degree since 2022, 2023. So many people, like, they don't know about that yet because they renewed. Let's say if they renewed their Brazilian passports through a consulate in the US, let's say in 2016. They still have a good passport, right? So they have no clue that when they try to renew this thing, like, they are not going to be able to do so because they haven't recorded their marriage certificate in Brazil. Another nuance is that if you divorce, you also need to do the same, but then it's not going to be a plain recording. It's going to be more difficult because you may need to file for the homologation of your divorce abroad in Brazil, meaning that it's not just like recording the divorce. You actually need to run the divorce through the court system in Brazil. So the court system is going to interpret the decisions in that particular divorce and then see if they are going to allow the decision to have like legal force in Brazil or not. Most of the time, yes, like the Brazilian courts, they are going to basically, give a green light to whatever was decided abroad. But many times they're going to say, well, this piece in particular, I don't agree, and this is not going to have a legal effects in Brazil. Okay, so that's on the divorce. So we spoke about the marriage. Now we spoke about the divorce, but the concept here is whatever happens to your civil life abroad, it should be recorded in Brazil to produce legal effects. Now, listen, a question I hear sometimes, well, if you're saying that I need to record that you have a legal effects and I'm not recording, doesn't mean I'm single in Brazil. No, you're not single. You're still married. You are just a married person who happens to be skipping on your obligations in Brazil, right? Another common mistake we see being made by Brazilian nationals It's like they are married to someone abroad in Europe, Asia, the United States, and they are going to buy property in Brazil. But because they didn't do their homework of recording the marriage in the first place, guess what? They are going to present themselves as single. And this is not just fraud, this is actually a crime specified in the Brazilian Penal Code, right? So people are buying a property, right? Like you're going to buy a property, something that you don't necessarily need to do. You're doing that, as potentially, for satisfaction, as a source of joy. And you are committing a crime, right? Like, it makes zero sense, but that's what we see every now and then, happening whenever people get in trouble, right? Like after you get in trouble, let's say you bought as a single, you declared that you're single, and then in the future you're going to have another transaction, and then for some reason the cartório takes notice of your correct civil status of married. They are typically going to inform the public attorney, like to file for a criminal procedure against you, really serious stuff. And again, something that we unfortunately see happening every now and then. All right. K9999, will getting a São Tomé Príncipe help fast track for Brazilian path to citizenship. All right. That's an interesting topic. That's not a topic in which we specialize, right? Not our specialty by any measures, but this is a subject we got in contact recently, right? So I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna address a few factors that could potentially relate to the Brazilian citizenship, right? So São Tomé Príncipe, for those of you who don't know, is a Portuguese-speaking country. And Brazil has this kind of a fast track for immigration whenever the applicant is coming from a Portuguese language-speaking country, which happens to be the case of São Tomé, right? Now, São Tomé Príncipe is now offering a purchase your citizenship kind of thing, which is extremely rare, right? Like many countries, they offer a track for you to become a citizen through investment, but not for you to buy the citizenship, right? And it looks like, and again, I'm not, I don't specialize in São Tomé Príncipe, but what I saw all there is that they are offering something that basically I think you would invest or spend like in the country like 90,000 euros or 90,000 US dollars, and guess what? They would give you a São Tomé Príncipe passport, right? So the idea here that SK 9999 is asking is like, is this solid or not? And unfortunately, I'm unable to tell if it is solid or not. But going back to the factors impacting on your potential track to Brazilian citizenship. So let's say you get the São Tomé Príncipe passport. It means you are a national from a Portuguese-speaking country. And as a national of a Portuguese-speaking country, you have the option to apply for residency in Brazil just because you come from a Portuguese-speaking country, okay? So that's the potential first nice thing, meaning that you don't need to apply for a digital nomad, you don't need to buy real estate, you don't need to marry someone, you don't need to retire, right? Just because you are a national of a Portuguese-speaking country, in theory, you can come to Brazil and apply for this residency, right? It's CPLP is the acronym for this track, and typically you're gonna get a two-year residency, right? So you don't get. There are two other interpretations that I saw out there. One is that you get a single year. Another is that you get the permanent residency out of the bat. And the interpretation I have, like in my head, like based on my memory of the applicable laws is that you're going to have 2 years of temporary residency, and before those 2 years expire, you can apply to renew your residency, and at the renewal, you can opt for the permanent residency, all right? So 2 years of temporary residency, and then you become a permanent resident. Unfortunately, Brazil doesn't use the terminology permanent residency. They use this funky term, a residency for an undetermined period of time. Is just like, a weird way of saying, listen, I'm going to give you something permanent, but I may decide to take this away from you, all right? So let's go back to permanent residency. And then under permanent residency, based on the Brazilian constitution, if you are in Brazil for a single year as a national from a Portuguese-speaking country, you could apply for the citizenship, right? Now, if you look at the Constitution says single year as a resident, but when you apply through immigration, they're going to give you 2 years of temporary residency. And typically, the Brazilian immigration system, they are not going to let you take a shot at citizenship unless you have the permanent residency, right? So you have a discrepancy here between the Constitution and the actual immigration framework, right? So what we know that some people are doing, because we could identify one lawsuit to that effect, is that they are basically going to the courts and saying, you know what, I don't care what immigration is saying, like, the Brazilian Constitution, which obviously is substantially superior to any immigration framework. They are saying nationals from Portuguese-speaking countries, they have a shot at Brazilian citizenship 1 year after 1 year of legal residency in the country. All right? Pretty interesting subject, K99. That was a nice question. All right, Ozas, I am a naturalized U.S. citizen, but my spouse is from Nigeria. I have the financial resources to invest in real estate and more. Will my spouse have an issue? Ozas, it depends on where you're going to be applying for whatever visa you're trying to get, right? Like if you are in the U.S., your spouse is Nigerian and is in the U.S. as well, I would say chances are you're not going to have issues as long as the spouse is at least a legal resident in the United States, all right? But if you guys are in Nigeria, chances are your U.S. Citizenship is not going to help much, all right? Unfortunately, okay? An alternative, let's say you can come to Brazil, buy property in Brazil, apply for the real estate investor residency, send the paperwork to your consulate. Let's say if you're living outside of the United States and Brazil. And through the consulate, you would have this pre-approved package. It takes your immigration status to a different level, okay? Never guaranteed, never 100% guaranteed. There is no 100% guarantee in immigration, whether in the United States, in Portugal, Brazil, whatever. So never guaranteed, but again, once you have this package sent to the consulate saying, listen, this person, they bought real estate in Brazil, now they are applying for the real estate investor visa, which, by the way, is pre-approved by the Brazilian immigration in Brazil. You have a very good standing for the visa application through a consulate or embassy, right? Another distinction, just explaining, whenever you deal with a Brazilian embassy, an embassy is like the main representation body of a country in another country, and the consulate is typically either a section of the embassy or a separate office. Okay, so in the United States, for instance, there is one embassy of Brazil in the United States, which naturally is located in Washington, D.C., and then you have a bunch of Brazilian consulates across the country. okay? And, for some countries, naturally, you're not going to have anything else other than the embassy, but the embassy is going to have a consular section within the embassy. So even if we said, only consulates deal with this type of stuff, it would still be true, because even at the embassies, most of the time they are going to have a consular department within the embassy. All right. Okay. So Kevin, Anthony, I love your team. Terrific so far working through our Brazilian immigration papers. Thank you. I love that, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing. Very important to me and all of us, to hear that you are happy with the work being done so far. Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate the kind words. Mansour, can you arrange any invitation letter or any help in processing my visa application? I'm from Pakistan. Yes, sir. What will be your fee? Mansour, so we don't issue letters, just like invitation letters at this stage. Whenever you hire our services, and then it becomes like all included, right? Like we don't nick and dime our clients for stuff, but we don't issue letters before a meaningful engagement, Mansour. That would be just too risky, right? I think that for any provider, to give out letters out there without a meaningful assignment. But let's say, like I said, that we have clients who will buy a property from abroad and then apply for the Brazil real estate investor visa. In this case, naturally, right, we not only give you letters, but we actually have your full pre-approved immigration package sent from Brazil to the consulate in charge of your jurisdiction. So if you're Pakistan, I think there is one, I'm not sure if it is I think it's an embassy in Islamabad, right? But Mansour, yeah, so if you're interested in the real estate route, my recommendation for you is to schedule a consultation, and then we can talk more about this route, which could be viable for you. All right, Mansour. Alexander, thanks for the discussion. This is exactly our case. We need to get our marriage registered in Brazil then. Well, that's the whole purpose of the live stream, right, Alexander, is to share knowledge, is to, support the international community when it comes to Brazil and Portugal. Absolutely, Alexander. So you need to record everything. And just because you're saying it is your case here, just another piece of information, not saying it is your case, right? But many other cases we see is like one of the spouses who happens to be the Brazilian one may have like a prior divorce. And if the divorce took place in the United States, or meaning any country other than Brazil, then typically you're going to need to handle those things in sequence, okay? And not surprisingly, right, because life happens. That's just like how life is. Sometimes we have clients with like 2 prior divorces, and then they're trying to record the current marriage, right? And you cannot, record the current marriage if you haven't handled the 2 prior divorces, right? And guess what? It's not just the divorce; it's also the marriage, right? So we do see sometimes clients in this exact situation. They are trying to register a marriage, and they have 2 prior divorces. So they're going to need to handle the marriage recording for the first marriage, and then they are going to need to homologate the divorce. They're going to need to do the exact same thing for the second marriage, and only after those 4 things, they are going to be able to record their current marriage, okay? And that's only when there is a Brazilian in the loop. So let's say if you are married to a Brazilian and you are the one with a prior divorce, Brazil doesn't care about your prior divorce. Brazil doesn't want to know about your divorce, right? Brazil wants to know about the Brazilian national. So let's assume there is a U.S. citizen married to a Brazilian, and this U.S. citizen is in his third marriage. Again, Brazil doesn't care about the two prior marriages and the two prior divorces. Brazil is only going to care about this U.S. citizen third marriage, because this third marriage happens to be with a Brazilian national. So it is the Brazilian national who's going to trigger this whole idea of recording in Brazil. All right. And I hope that was helpful. SK9999. If I choose the real estate route, how long does it take to be able to apply for the Brazilian citizenship? What is the physical presence requirement? SK99. Brazilian real estate investment is going to give you 4 years of temporary residency. Okay, that's what you're going to get. Before those 4 years expire, you have the opportunity to renew. And when you renew, you can renew as either an additional 4-year period of time, and you could just keep doing that, or you can actually renew as a permanent residency. So 4 years under temporary residency, then you can upgrade, if you will, to permanent residency, and then 4 years after permanent residency, you can have the application for a Brazilian citizenship. The physical presence requirement. So you're going to have two different presence requirements during the first 4 years, right? Or actually during any period of time for the either temporary or permanent residency. You need to be in Brazil for at least 14 days every couple of years to maintain your residency, whether the temporary 4 years or the permanent after the first 4 years. Now, if you want to apply for the citizenship, it's a different requirement of physical presence, right? So to just maintain residency, 14 days every couple of years. Now, if you're trying to apply for citizenship, guess what? They are going to have a higher requirement, which is going to be 9 months of presence within the 12 months after securing the permanent residency, right? So just making sure that I'm answering your question, right? How long does it take to be able to apply for the Brazilian citizenship, right? So 4 years of temporary residency. After those 4 years, you're going to get the 4 years of permanent residency. And in this case, is actually going to be, you would have, in theory, 3 months a year to be outside of Brazil. So because you're going to need to wait 4 years of permanent residency to apply for the citizenship, it means that in total, you could be outside of the country for up to a year. Okay, so that's the rule. If you were married to a Brazilian, in a single year, you could apply for the citizenship. And the rule here is similar. You could be 3 months out of 12 outside of the country. If you need to stay in Brazil for 4 years, then you could be outside of the country for up to 3 months per year, meaning that in 4 years you could not be away from Brazil for over 12 months, if you will. All right, SK. Okay, it looks like we are almost reaching the end of our live stream. We're going to take an additional couple of questions. And before we finish, let me remind you, we're going to have another live stream. The next one is going to be next Wednesday. All right, we're not going to have a live stream on Sunday. We are trying to have 2 live streams on a Sunday per month, and we had one already, so I think we're skipping this coming one, and then we probably gonna have another live stream on a Sunday in the following week. But the next one is gonna be probably on November 26th, right? I guess November 26th, which is gonna be the next Wednesday. All right, let's take an additional couple of questions. Mansoor, how to become your client? What will be your fee in real estate investment route? How to schedule a consultation? Mansoor, you can reach out through our email. Okay, this is our email address. You can reach out and just say, listen, I want to have a consultation with Luciano, and I need to know the fees for the real estate investment route. And our team is going to give you exactly that. They're going to give you a breakdown for the fees, right, which you don't need to schedule a consultation to know naturally. And they are also going to be able to schedule, particularly if you want to have a consultation with me, let our team know they are going to get this consultation booked. All right, Mansoor. So there you go. Email address below. Craig Smith, hi Luciano. Since I own a house in Brazil and married to a Brazilian, what documents will I need to bring from the U.S. for permanent residency? Craig, congratulations for both accomplishments, for the property in Brazil, married to a Brazilian. Congratulations. So in terms of documents, it's going to be a laundry list of things, right? Like whenever we are assisting with this process, we actually use a project management tool known as Monday.com, and we have over there like the laundry list, and you upload some of these things. Others, we work with you on them, right? But there are just too many items to tell you everything that's required. I can tell you what typically is going to trip people, right? That's probably your concern. Like, what should I be more concerned about it? So first thing is to have, the marriage properly recorded in Brazil, right? It may be your case or not. And the second one is going to be the FBI background check, right? The FBI background check. Whenever you are applying for permanent residency based on marriage, you're not going to be able to use a lesser background check, for instance, from a county level or from the state level. You need to use the FBI background check, which is typically much easier to obtain when you are in the United States. And on top of the FBI background check, you're going to need an apostille from the Department of State in Washington, D.C., right? You cannot skip on that. So that's going to be another major requirement, okay? So marriage background check on your spouse. When you're moving from the U.S., something that happens very often is that the Brazilian national doesn't have a valid ID, okay? The Brazilian national may have like the Brazilian passport, but typically the Brazilian immigration is going to require an ID on top of the Brazilian passport. This ID is known typically in Brazil as RG. We say RG. There is another one which is typically the driver license. So you need one of those two documents to be valid, and it may take like 30 to 60 days to get those things. So this is something else you guys can work ahead of time. Okay, and in addition to that, so we spoke about the, recording the the marriage certificate from the U.S. in Brazil. If that's the case, we spoke about the FBI background check. We spoke about the need for the Brazilian to have a current ID on top of the Brazilian passport. And the other requirement that trips a lot of people is like that you must be living in Brazil. Okay, there is no such a thing as applying for permanent residency from a consulate or through a consulate, or when you are still living abroad. The Brazilian permanent residency is only available to you if you are living already in Brazil. Okay, so there is a need for you to work on logistics. So you can make all of those things work seamlessly, right? Like we've been doing that for a long time, and that's why many people will hire our office to assist them in that journey. It doesn't always work perfectly, right? Because there are so many moving parts, but you have someone who's really dedicated to, get you across the finish line. And I think that, we're very pleased to hear from our clients that they feel like that. All right, so the final one. Wayne, thank you for the information about prior marriage, divorced, become a widower, and now married to a Brazilian. Nice sharing, Wayne. So if the Brazilian is like in our current marriage, but in your prior marriage there was, and in your prior 2 marriages, right? There was no Brazilian in the loop. You're good. You don't need to record any of that prior stuff. You only need to record the current Brazilian marriage, if you will. All right, Wayne. So really nice topics that we discussed today. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your support. If you haven't liked our live stream so far, please hit the like button, subscribe to follow us for more videos, channels, and interesting content. I hope to see you next Wednesday, and I wish you a blessed rest of your day.